I never thought I'd end up lying on a cold, creaky wooden floor in the middle of winter, shivering next to a guy the first barely knew, trying to stay warm by sharing body heat. But that's exactly how last Saturday night went down. And honestly, it turned out to be one of those moments you remember forever, even if you'd never have guessed it at the time. So, here's how I got there. I'm Matt, 28, pretty average guy, works in graphic design, lives in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn that's way too drafty for my own good. Usually I'm a planner. I like my weekends to be chill but predictable. Maybe catch a movie, order some takeout, avoid social interaction. But this past weekend, everything went sideways in the best possible way. It started on Friday afternoon. I was at this little coffee shop near my place, just grabbing my usual black coffee when I ran into Ian. I'd seen him around before. He owns the bookstore down the block, the one with those weird overnight readings and poetry nights nobody seems to go to. Ian's the kind of guy who looks like he stepped out of a Wes Anderson movie. Thick glasses, a forever messy mop of curly hair, and this half smile that makes you wonder what he's thinking. We'd never really talked, just exchanged polite hellos, but that day the place was packed and the cafe was out of the table I usually sit at. Ian noticed me hovering awkwardly and motioned me over to his tiny corner spot. "You can join me," he said, like it was no big deal. We ended up talking for hours. Turns out, he's way more interesting than you'd expect from a bookstore owner. He's got this dry humor, and his passion for literature is contagious. We joked about everything from bad coffee to the apocalypse, and somehow ended up making plans to check out a jazz open mic night the next day. Saturday came, and the weather was brutal. I mean, the kind of cold that makes your bones ache. But I was excited to see Ian again, so I bundled up and headed to the bar where the open mic was happening. Ian was already there when I arrived, waiting with 2 cups of hot cider. He looked kind of thrilled to see me, which was honestly a little unexpected. I mean, this wasn't exactly my usual scene. The night was great. The music was soulful, the crowd was small but friendly, and Ian was even more charming in the dim light of the bar. We talked about everything: music, books, life, and I was starting to think that maybe this cold night had some kind of magic to it. But here's where things got complicated. After the bar closed, Ian invited me to hang out at his place a few blocks away. I was hesitant. His apartment was tiny, he said, and honestly, I was just thinking about getting home and into my own warm bed. But there was something about the way he asked, like he really wanted me to stay. When we got to his place, the heating was broken. Like, completely out. The kind of cold that sneaks under your skin and makes you question your life choices. We tried everything. Blankets, hot drinks, even the tiny space heater that barely worked. But the cold was relentless. That's when Ian suggested we just lie down on the floor together. It sounded weird at first, but when you're freezing and desperate, you do weird things. So there we were, 2 grown men, lying on a creaky wooden floor, huddled close, just to keep from turning into human popsicles. And honestly, that moment, that ridiculous, freezing, awkward moment, felt strangely intimate. Like we were both letting our guards down in a way that only happens when you're literally stuck in the cold together. I don't know what came next, but something shifted. And as I lay there, my cheek almost touching Ian's arm, I realized that sometimes the best memories come from the coldest, most unexpected places. But that's getting ahead of myself. What happened after we got off that floor? Well, you'll have to hear the rest of the story. Because it's not just about staying warm. It's about what happens when you finally find someone you want to be close to, even if it means freezing your ass off to do it. So there we were, lying side by side on Ian's uncomfortably hard wooden floor, both shivering, wrapped up in a patchwork of blankets we'd dragged from the couch and bed. At first, everything felt a little absurd. I mean, 2 grown men huddling on the floor like it was some kind of survival camp. The cold was biting, but the weirdness of the situation made me laugh quietly. Ian caught my grin and smirked. Well, this is definitely not the way I imagined tonight going. I laughed too, my breath fogging up in the chilly air. Yeah, same. I was expecting jazz and hot cider, not frostbite and floor naps. We both cracked a smile, and suddenly the tension shifted, like the awkwardness melted just a little, helped along by the shared vulnerability. There's something about being cold that strips away pretenses. You're just two people trying to stay warm. No walls, no masks. I scooted a little closer. You ever had to do this before? Sleep on the floor to stay warm? Ian shook his head, eyes playful but soft. Nope. Usually my heating works. Or I'm smart enough to stay at home. But I guess tonight's a first for both of us. Same, I said, feeling the warmth from his body seeping through the layers of blankets. Kind of nice, though. Weird, but nice. He glanced at me, and for a second, I thought I saw something shift in his gaze. Something like hope, or maybe just curiosity. We stayed quiet for a beat, just listening to the muffled sounds of the city outside, the occasional car passing, a dog barking in the distance, the faint hum of a heater from another apartment. Inside, the cold was still real, but with Ian next to me, it felt manageable. I'm sorry for the heat, Ian said, breaking the silence, his voice low. I know it's freezing. I've got a space heater, but it's old and barely works. No worries, I said, shrugging. Makes for a better story, right? Ian laughed softly. Yeah, definitely a story I'll tell my future grandkids. I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the kind of warmth that comes from unexpected connection. When you realize that sometimes you don't have to be perfect, you just have to show up. After a while, I shifted again, letting my hand brush against Ian's under the blanket. He didn't pull away. Instead, he turned slightly toward me, and I could feel the steady beat of his heart through his shirt. Matt, he said quietly. Yeah? This is kind of nice. I mean, all this, even the cold. I nodded, feeling my chest tighten a little. Yeah, me too. For a moment, everything else, the cold, the weird situation, the fact that I was lying on the floor, just faded away. It was just us. Two people, close enough to feel each other's warmth, sharing a moment that felt both fragile and real. I wanted to say a lot of things, but didn't want to break the fragile silence. Instead, I just let my hand rest on his arm, feeling the softness beneath his sleeve. Minutes passed, maybe more. Then Ian shifted again, inching just a little closer until our sides touched. It was subtle but felt huge to me, like crossing an invisible line. I don't usually do this, he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Do what? I asked, my heart racing. Lie down with a guy on the floor and actually want to be close. I swallowed hard and met his gaze. Me neither, but I'm glad we're here. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that lit up his whole face. Yeah, me too. The room felt smaller and warmer all at once. After what felt like forever, I finally found the courage to lean in and brush my lips lightly against his temple. Ian's breath hitched, and I could feel him relax against me. We stayed like that for a while, just holding each other, the cold still there but now a distant background to whatever this was becoming. Eventually, Ian whispered, So what happens now? I laughed softly. Well, first I'm hoping you fix that heating. He smirked. Deal. And maybe you stick around a little longer so I don't freeze to death. I grinned. Definitely. And just like that, the cold night didn't feel so cold anymore. It felt like the start of something I hadn't expected but was already hoping for. I don't know where this is going yet, but lying there on that ridiculous floor with Ian close enough to hear his heartbeat, I realized that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected moments. And sometimes you just have to be willing to get a little cold to find your warmth. The next morning I woke up with a stiff neck and a numb leg, but for some reason I wasn't in any rush to leave Ian's place. The cold hadn't completely disappeared, but there was a quiet comfort in the way the sunlight filtered softly through the thin curtains, casting patterns on the floor where we'd been huddled the night before. Ian was already up, sitting at the tiny kitchen table with a mug of something steaming, probably coffee or tea. His hair was still messy in that charming way, like he'd just rolled out of bed. When he saw me stirring, he smiled that same warm smile from the night before. Morning, he said, voice low but sincere. Morning, I replied, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes and stretching my arms above my head. How'd you sleep? Better than expected, he admitted, though I think my heating system might be permanently broken now. I laughed, feeling the warmth of the room and the awkwardness of the previous night fading into something lighter, more hopeful. Well, if you ever want to repeat the whole floor thing, I'm a pro at it now. Ian grinned. I don't know if I'm ready for a sequel just yet, but thanks for the offer. We settled into a quiet rhythm, him sipping his drink, me scrolling through my phone, both trying to shake off the remnants of the cold, and the vulnerability that comes with sharing a small space with someone new in that way. After a while, Ian looked up from his cup. So what's your plan for the rest of the day? I shrugged. Honestly, I don't have one. I was thinking about heading home, maybe binge something on Netflix, but I'm open to suggestions. He paused, then said, if you're not in a rush, there's a little park nearby. It's supposed to be beautiful this time of year, even if it's cold. I was thinking of taking a walk to warm up. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stay in the cozy bubble we'd created, but another part was curious. About him, about the day, about what might happen next. Sounds good, I said finally. Let's do it. We bundled up in the warmest coats we had, Ian handing me a thick scarf he'd dug out from a drawer. The cold outside hit us like a slap, sharp and biting. But it was different now. Less threatening, almost thrilling. It was like we were sharing this little adventure, a secret escape from the usual. The park was quiet, sprinkled with patches of snow and crisp, frosty air. We wandered along the paths, talking about everything and nothing, his favorite authors, my failed attempts at cooking, the weird quirks of our neighborhood. The conversation flowed easy, the kind that happens when you're genuinely interested in someone and not just making small talk. At one point, Ian stopped and turned to me, his breath visible in the chill. I'm really glad you stayed last night. I smiled, feeling a little warmth rush to my cheeks. Me too. I wasn't sure if I should, but I'm glad I did. We fell into a comfortable silence, walking side by side, our steps crunching over the frozen leaves and snow. There was something about this simple moment, two people just being honest and present, that felt incredibly rare and valuable. As we reached a bench overlooking a small frozen pond, Ian paused and looked out over the icy surface. You ever think about how strange it is that we need other people to keep warm? Like, literally. I laughed softly. Yeah, it's kind of poetic, isn't it? We're all just walking around, trying to find someone to share the heat with. He turned to me with that half smile again. Maybe that's why the floor thing wasn't so bad. Yeah, I agreed, feeling a flicker of something deeper stirring inside me. Maybe. We sat on the bench for a while, the cold nipping at our faces, but the quiet intimacy between us growing with each passing minute. It wasn't fireworks or grand gestures. It was something quieter, but more real. Two people, slowly finding a connection that felt like it could mean something. After a while, Ian nudged me gently. So, what do you say we make a new tradition? Next time the heat goes out, we find a better place to stay warm. I smiled, feeling a mix of hope and excitement. Deal. But maybe next time, with actual blankets and maybe a heater. He laughed. Agreed. As we stood up to head back, I realized that strange nights, cold floors, and unexpected connections might just be the start of something I'd been looking for without even knowing it. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see where this would go. We walked back through the park, our breaths forming little clouds in the cold air. The sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows between the bare trees. There was a kind of peacefulness to it, like the world had quieted down just for us. I glanced over at Ian and noticed the faint pink hue creeping up his cheeks from the cold, and I felt a warmth spread inside me that had nothing to do with the weather. So I started, trying to sound casual. What made you open that bookstore? Seems like a pretty niche gig these days. Ian smiled, and there was that half smile again, like he was letting me in on a secret. I guess I've always liked the idea of creating a little refuge, a place where people can slow down and get lost in stories. Plus, I'm a bit of a hopeless romantic when it comes to books. I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. I get that. I'm kind of the same with my design work. It's like trying to tell stories without words. He looked at me thoughtfully. You're an artist, huh? Something like that. I said, I like to think so. There was a pause, and then he asked, what about love stories? Do you believe in those? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't expected it, and I wasn't sure how to answer. I guess I'm still figuring that out, I said honestly. But I'm starting to think maybe the best ones aren't the grand, sweeping tales. Maybe they're just quiet moments, like lying on a cold floor trying to stay warm. Ian laughed softly. That's a pretty good line. You sure you don't want to be a poet? I shrugged. Maybe, or maybe just a guy who's lucky enough to share moments like this. We kept walking, the city lights flickering on as twilight deepened. The usual noise of Brooklyn felt distant, almost muted. It was like we'd stepped into our own little world. When we got back to Ian's apartment building, I hesitated for a second before turning to him. So what now? Are you going to fix the heater? Or are we sticking to floor adventures? He gave me a grin that was both mischievous and sincere. I think I'll fix the heater, but maybe we keep the floor tradition for when things get extra cold. I laughed. Deal. As I gathered my things, I realized I wasn't in any hurry to leave. There was something about Ian that made me want to stay, more than just the warmth. Before I could overthink it, I blurted out, "Hey, do you want to grab dinner sometime? Like, not just because the heat's broken." He looked surprised for a moment, then his eyes softened. I'd like that. That was all I needed to hear. Walking home that evening, the cold didn't bother me nearly as much. Maybe it was the memory of Ian's smile, or the way his hand had brushed against mine under the blankets. Maybe it was just the feeling that, sometimes, the coldest nights can lead to the warmest beginnings. And honestly, I was looking forward to finding out exactly where this would go. The days that followed felt like a slow, careful unfolding. Ian and I started texting more, but nothing too intense, just enough to keep the conversation going without rushing it. He'd send me random book recommendations or funny little observations about the neighborhood, and I'd reply with my own equally random thoughts or pictures of the terrible meals I attempted to cook. Our dinner date was simple but perfect. We met at this small Italian place Ian swore by, tucked away on a side street with twinkling fairy lights and a menu that smelled like home. Sitting across from him, I realized how easy it was to talk to him. No awkward silences, no pretending. Just two guys sharing a bottle of wine and stories they hadn't told anyone else. Halfway through the night, Ian reached across the table and brushed a stray curl off my forehead. The touch was light but electric. I caught his eye, and he smiled that same half-smile that had been following me around since the coffee shop. It made my stomach flip, in a good way. After dinner, we walked through the city, the streets alive but quiet enough that it felt like we were in our own bubble. At one point, Ian paused and looked up at the sky, the glow of the streetlights framing his face. You know, he said, "I've never really been good at this whole dating thing. Always figured I'd be alone, surrounded by books." I laughed softly. Well, I guess we're both surprises to ourselves then. He turned to me, eyes searching. What about you? What's your story? I hesitated, suddenly aware of how much I was revealing just by being here with him. I guess I've been waiting for something real, something that doesn't feel like a line from a movie or a Tinder profile. Ian nodded, like he understood exactly what I meant. Me too. We stopped outside a tiny bakery, the warm light spilling onto the sidewalk. Ian bought us each a slice of pie, and we sat on the steps, sharing bites and stories. When he reached for my hand, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. That night, when I got home, I couldn't stop smiling. The cold from the apartment seemed to fade completely, replaced by this new, slow-burning warmth that I hadn't expected. Over the next few weeks, our connection deepened. We'd meet for coffee, wander through bookstores, sometimes just sit in silence and read side by side. Ian showed me his favorite spots in the city, the little hidden parks, the best places for street art, a secret rooftop with a view that took my breath away. One night, we found ourselves back at Ian's place. This time, the heater was fixed, humming softly in the background. But instead of lying on the floor, we curled up on the couch, blankets draped over us, sharing warmth in a way that felt both new and familiar. I like this, Ian said quietly, his head resting on my shoulder. Me too. I agreed. There was a tenderness in that moment, a quiet promise that maybe, just maybe, the cold nights and broken heaters were just part of the story, one that we were writing together. And honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything. A couple of weeks in, Ian and I had settled into this comfortable rhythm. Not the kind where everything's predictable or boring, but the kind where you feel completely at ease just being yourself. We'd become fixtures in each other's lives, texting about the small stuff, like which weird new coffee shop opened, or what song was stuck in our heads, and sharing the bigger stuff too, like old memories that felt safer to tell now. One Friday evening, Ian texted me out of the blue. "Want to come over? I made dinner." That simple message sent this weird flutter through my chest. I was halfway through a work project, but I didn't want to say no. When I arrived, the smell of garlic and something roasting filled the apartment, and Ian greeted me at the door with that same crooked smile. "I'm impressed you made it here despite the work grind." I shrugged, grinning. "For you, I'll always find a way." He led me into the cramped kitchen, where he was finishing up plating some kind of pasta. "So, you're officially my dinner guest now," he said, handing me a glass of wine. "Please, don't judge my cooking too harshly." We ate at the little table, the heater humming in the background, casting a cozy glow over everything. The conversation flowed easily, bouncing from silly impressions of our coworkers to plans for a weekend trip neither of us had actually booked yet. After dinner, we moved to the couch, stretching out under one of those big, soft blankets. Ian pulled me close, and I could feel his warmth seep into me like a balm for all the stress I'd been carrying. "You know," he said softly, tracing lazy circles on my arm, "I never thought I'd be here, like really here, with someone who just gets it." I looked up at him, catching the light in his eyes, the quiet vulnerability there. "Me neither. I think that's why it's so different. Not forced, just real." He smiled, that honest smile that made me feel like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Real is good. We stayed like that for a while, not needing words, just the sound of each other's breathing and the soft flicker of the city outside his window. A few days later, we found ourselves at a tiny poetry reading Ian insisted I come to. I was skeptical, but he promised it'd be worth it. And honestly, it was. The room was small and packed with people who looked like they'd been born with a book in their hand. Ian was in his element, introducing me to his friends, sharing little anecdotes about the poems as if they were treasures hidden beneath the surface. At one point, Ian grabbed my hand under the table, squeezing it gently. I looked at him, feeling that familiar warmth spreading through me. "Thanks for coming," he whispered. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. That night, as we walked back to his place, the air was cold but crisp, the kind of cold that makes your breath come out in soft clouds. We stopped under a street lamp, and Ian looked at me seriously. "Matt, I want to ask you something," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "Okay. Are you open to seeing where this goes? Like, really going for it?" My heart pounded. I'd been wondering the same thing, but wasn't sure how to say it out loud. "I am," I said honestly. More than anything. He smiled, relieved and shy all at once. "Good, because I think this thing between us, it's worth it." I reached out, cupping his face gently, and leaned in. Our lips met softly at first, then with more certainty. The world around us blurred, and all I could feel was Ian, warm, steady, real. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine and said, "Cold floors and broken heaters aside, I think I'm glad the universe messed up that night." "Me too," I whispered. Walking back to his apartment, hand in hand, I realized that sometimes, the most unexpected moments, the ones that start out uncomfortable or awkward, can lead you exactly where you're meant to be. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future, because whatever came next, I knew I wouldn't have to face it alone. After that night, things between Ian and me settled into a kind of easy intimacy that felt both thrilling and comfortable at the same time. We weren't rushing, but there was an unspoken understanding that we were moving towards something meaningful. I kept thinking about how strange it was that a broken heater and a cold floor could lead me here, to someone who made everything feel a little warmer, even when the temperature outside was still brutal. One lazy Sunday afternoon, I found myself at Ian's place again. The apartment was filled with the soft afternoon light filtering through the windows, dust motes dancing in the air. Ian was bent over a pile of books on his coffee table, clearly in the middle of organizing, or maybe just procrastinating. I plopped down beside him on the couch, pulling my legs up and resting my head on his shoulder. He didn't seem to mind, and I liked that. "Busy day?" I asked. Ian shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips, trying to figure out if I should finally get rid of some of these. "But every book has a story, you know?" I nodded. "Yeah, it's hard to let go of things that mean something." He glanced down at me, those warm brown eyes catching mine. "I'm glad you're here. Makes this whole sorting thing a little less lonely," I grinned. "Well, I can't let you drown in your own books. Besides, I think you're just avoiding the real work." He laughed, and it sounded like music to me. "Maybe you're right." We spent the afternoon talking about everything and nothing, our pasts, our hopes, the silly things that made us laugh until we couldn't breathe. Ian told me about growing up in a small town, about the day he realized books weren't just stories, but lifelines. I shared stories about my family, my clumsy attempts at cooking, and how I'd almost given up on finding something real before that freezing night on his floor. At some point, the conversation turned quiet, comfortable. Ian shifted so he was leaning into me, and I wrapped an arm around him without thinking. The feeling of his head resting against my chest was grounding, like I was exactly where I needed to be. He sighed softly. "You know, I wasn't sure about this whole us thing at first. I mean, I liked you, but I was scared. Scared of getting hurt, of things not working out." I squeezed his hand. "Same here. But sometimes the things worth having are the scariest to get." He looked up at me, eyes filled with something I can only describe as hope. "I want to try, Matt. I really do." "Me too, Ian. Me too." From then on, it felt like we were building something together, a foundation made of small moments, honest conversations, and the kind of trust that sneaks up on you when you least expect it. One chilly evening, a few weeks later, Ian called me, voice a little nervous. "Hey, do you want to come over? I have something to show you." When I arrived, he led me to the rooftop of his building. The city stretched out before us, all glittering lights and distant sounds. Ian handed me a thermos of hot chocolate and a couple of thick blankets. "This," he said, smiling, "is my little favorite place. I come here when I need to think or just escape." We settled under the blankets, leaning into each other as the cold air nipped at our faces. The city buzzed below, but up there, it was just us. Ian looked at me, eyes reflecting the city lights. "I'm glad we found each other, even if it started off on a cold floor." I laughed softly. "Yeah, who knew freezing could be so romantic?" He nudged me playfully. "Don't ruin the moment." We stayed up there for hours, talking about dreams we'd barely dared to say aloud, making plans that felt like promises. As the night deepened, Ian pulled me close, and I knew whatever came next, we'd face it together. Sometimes the best warmth comes from people, not heaters. And that night, wrapped in blankets and his arms, I finally understood what that really meant. That rooftop became our little sanctuary over the weeks, a place where the world's noise softened, and it was just Ian and me against the cold night air. We'd bring blankets, cups of something warm, and sometimes just sit in silence, letting the city lights twinkle below while our fingers intertwined. One night, as winter started to loosen its grip and the first hints of spring teased the air, Ian turned to me and said, "Remember that first night, lying on my floor, freezing our butts off?" I laughed, the memory still vivid. How could I forget? It was ridiculous, but somehow perfect. He smiled softly. "It was the beginning of everything, and even if the heater had worked, I'm glad it didn't." I looked into his eyes, feeling that familiar warmth spread through me. "Me too, because that night, cold as it was, brought me to you." He took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "I wrote something, just a little something for you." Inspired by that night and everything since, I unfolded it and read the shaky, heartfelt words, simple, honest, and full of hope. I could feel the weight of it, not just the poem, but everything it represented: trust, vulnerability, a future we were starting to build together. I folded the note carefully and looked back at Ian. "This means more than you know." He shrugged, a little embarrassed but sincere. "Well, I figured if we can survive the floor, we can survive anything." I smiled, leaning in to press a gentle kiss to his lips. It felt like the closing of one chapter and the tentative start of another. One where warmth wasn't just about blankets or heaters, but about two people choosing each other, even in the cold. As we sat there, wrapped in blankets and each other's arms, I thought about how unexpected life could be. How sometimes, the moments that start out uncomfortable or even unpleasant can lead you to the most meaningful connections. And maybe that's the real lesson. Warmth isn't just something you find, it's something you make together. With Ian beside me, I finally felt like I was home.